What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So if you have a Samsung Galaxy A35, should you get this year's A36? Well, the short answer to that is no. And the longer answer is no. Nowadays, very few people actually upgrade their smartphones, or anything tech-related, honestly, every single year. Which begs the question, why do these companies make new products every single year? Well, to stay relevant, for one, but usually, a new device is decisively better than its predecessor. I don't think that's the case with this year's A36. At least compared to the A35 that came before it. And that's a problem for two reasons, actually. The first is what I already mentioned. People don't upgrade every year, and the newest device, not being much better, gives them even less of a reason to do so. The other problem is that for people who have something older, like an A34, or a different device like an A15, or maybe a device from a different company like a Moto G or a Poco phone or something, if that person does even a second of research, perhaps they even stumble upon this video, they'll quickly realize that buying this latest device likely isn't the best idea either. I mean, you can get the A35 now for even cheaper. It's barely any worse than this newer A36, so why wouldn't a person just make that move instead? If the latest device isn't attracting last year's customers, and it's not the best option for other customers coming from something different, then the only answer to the question of why do these companies make new products every single year is just to remain relevant. Which, I mean, they got me there. I am making this video after all. Now, I want to make sure I'm clear on something. This A36 isn't a bad phone. It's a great value if you don't want to spend flagship money, but still want something nice, something familiar, something with a lot of features and decent specs. It's just truly not any better than the A35, and in a couple of ways, it might even be a little less enticing. Of course, Samsung was never going to make this phone look drastically different from last year's. The A36 is technically a little bigger screen-wise. It's 6.7 inches corner to corner. The A35 was 6.6 inches. But that extra tenth of an inch doesn't gain you any usable screen real estate. And actually, the black borders framing the A36 aren't any slimmer either. They're still kind of noticeable, actually. So I mean, from the front, I consider these phones to be more or less identical. Around back, however, not only do these phones look different, but they're actually built different too. Samsung has been slowly giving these A-series phones more premium materials, so this year, this A36 gets a Gorilla Glass Victus Plus back panel, while last year's phone was all plastic. Can you honestly tell a difference? No, not really. In fact, what's more noticeable on the newer, nicer built A36 is actually its weight and thinness. It's 14 grams lighter and nearly a full millimeter slimmer. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but you can see it and feel it in your hand. So that's something, I guess. What I really don't like on this A36 though is the morphed together camera module. I thought it would grow on me, or I would get used to it, but it's just a bad look. And it doesn't make any sense. The cameras themselves on this phone aren't any different. They weren't upgraded or changed in any way whatsoever. But Samsung popped on this single-piece camera cover that's been collecting dust and debris to, I don't know, just give the phone a new look, a different look. But here's the thing. While previous year's A-series phones, like the A35, looked identical to, say, an S-series phone or an FE, this A36 now sticks out like a sore thumb. You used to be able to buy a cheap Samsung phone and no one would know. But now, if you get this cheaper A36, everyone will know. It's a design choice that Samsung seriously got wrong, and I hope they ditch it. I really don't want to see it implemented on their flagships, that's for sure. The rest of these phones, physically, are more or less the same. Same buttons on the side, same USB-C port, same lack of a headphone jack. But, as expected, Samsung snatched away a physical feature on the A36, micro SD card support. It was inevitable, obviously, but still a bummer, and still something people gripe about, which I actually think is becoming stronger and stronger of an argument nowadays. You don't get any more storage on the new A36, even though you lose that expandable storage option, and micro SD cards are far cheaper than maxing out these phones at just 256 gigabytes. I get it, Samsung and Google and everyone else wants to sell you a cloud storage subscription of some sort. Micro SD cards probably don't make a ton of sense nowadays either, but still, there are a handful of people out there who might seriously consider this a deciding factor by itself. Now, in addition to the very minor size increase, if you want to call it that, Samsung did make one more change to the display on the A36. They bumped up the max brightness just enough to, I guess, call it an upgrade. But honestly, I don't think there's much more that was even needed. Both these phones have Super AMOLED panels with a full HD 2340 by 1080 resolution and a 120Hz refresh rate. The new A36 gets a few hundred nits brighter, both when you crank it up yourself and with auto brightness enabled, and while you may have an easier time looking at the A36 outside in direct sunlight, that's truly the only difference. Fortunately, I've always felt that these mid-tier A-series phones offered great displays, and that's definitely the case here. Regardless of the brightness bump, these AMOLED panels are bold and colorful, the 120Hz refresh rate is obviously essential, and you can argue this all you want, but I feel that no one is going to tell a difference between these screens and what's offered on like the flagship S25. You don't really get a reason to go from the A35 to the A36 here, but the screens are reason enough to still consider either one of these phones in general in 2025. Also, just a quick note, Samsung didn't upgrade the in-display fingerprint sensors either. They're still the same optical variety, and they go back and forth on which one unlocks first, but there's truly no real difference. And it's the same with the speakers too. Both phones seem to have the same dual speaker setup. They sound good enough whether you're listening at 50% volume or cranked all the way up, but there's no difference or upgrade that I'm aware of or can hear for myself. Okay, so let's get into the most important stuff now, and that would be performance. So this A36 did get a different processor from the A35, which in and of itself is probably a big relief to a lot of people. It's powered by the Snapdragon 6 Gen 3, while the A35 got stuck with an Exynos 1380. Some people might say that going from any Exynos to almost any Snapdragon is enough, but the problem I've seen is the simple fact that the Snapdragon inside this A36 isn't decisively better. It actually spits out slightly lower Geekbench scores for whatever reason. It's a model year newer than the Exynos at least, but it almost feels more like a sidestep than anything else. On the one hand, I know there are plenty of people, like I said, who won't touch an Exynos powered phone to begin with, still. So maybe they skipped the A35 entirely last year, and with this A36 out now, all Snapdragon powered, they'll be back to this phone for a while. But beyond the brand names, in my side-by-side speed tests and daily usage, these phones take turns loading different things first, which to me doesn't feel right. They're set up the same, I'm doing my best to make this a fair test, but like I said, my A36 is just not performing better or faster every single time compared to the A35, which I feel is a tiny bit of a problem. Again, not a problem with the phone itself, just a problem with the idea of upgrading. I also know that year over year, performance differences aren't always obvious, especially depending on what you do with your smartphone. But still, if you ask me, is the A36 faster, more powerful, or better than the A35 spec-wise, I would say no, not exactly. It's got the Snapdragon power people are after, but I don't know that you'll be blown away by its speed or consistency in comparison. The only thing you get for sure is not an Exynos chip, which again, if you read some of the comments online, that's enough for some people. But I don't think the bar should be that low anymore. I've felt the last few higher spec Exynos chips in the A30-somethings and A50-somethings have fared better than their unfortunate reputation. One other consideration I'll throw out is that from a long-term perspective, you will get a few more years out of this A36 now. Samsung is promising 6 Android updates for this phone, while they only have 4 total in store for the A35. When you double down on the fact that people just don't upgrade that often anymore, you can keep this A36 a lot longer without feeling outdated. Or better yet, buy it in a year or two and still be safe with some updates to come. However, if you want less software features, which may sound weird, but maybe no AI related things for whatever reason, then I guess the A35 has an odd advantage there. This A36 doesn't get Galaxy AI, or at least all the features. Samsung just gave it a couple intelligence add-ons that are vaguely related to the Galaxy AI goodies they continually push. Circle to Search though is available on the A35, and I think there would be less and less of an obvious distinction between intelligence features features or Galaxy AI features and just One UI updates. But still, older phones will remain AI-less, which is slowly becoming a talking point too in some circles. When it comes to battery life and charging speeds, Samsung doesn't do a great job communicating this, but this A36 did get faster charging support, 45-watt wired, which is a substantial upgrade over the 25-watt with the A35. You can get way more than 50% of a charge in 30 minutes or a full charge to 100% in about an hour, which is great, but it's been years since Samsung gave you the accessories you need to achieve those speeds. If you do get this phone, you may as well get some faster wall plugs to take advantage of that. Both phones are powered by the same 5,000 mAh batteries, and as far as I've seen, the battery life and longevity doesn't really vary much between these two. Honestly though, I'd rather take advantage of faster charging speeds myself, since it's not likely that Samsung would have made any big battery gains that yield a huge difference anyway. Finally, flipping the phones back around and looking at that hideous camera setup once more, I'll just quickly say that Samsung did not do much, if anything, to improve the pictures or videos on this A36. The hardware seems to be exactly the same. 50 megapixel main lens, 8 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro. The selfie cameras are different in their megapixel count by 1, but otherwise don't show much of a difference either. There's nothing hiding within the camera apps that I found that tell me these phones are any different. You might make the argument that the software gets tweaked or the Snapdragon processor in the A36 might be better at doing something, but in the side-by-side shots that I've taken, these phones captured nearly the same looking images. And any difference in color or exposure can be very easily evened out in either direction to make them look identical, more or less. You don't get any more features, you don't get any more powerful camera setup, you truly don't get any upgrades at all. The only difference you might see has more to do with color balance than anything else. Comparisons like this one honestly are a little frustrating for me to make sometimes, because I can't exactly say, no, don't buy the new phone, it's not any better, thanks for watching, even though I technically could. It's a little more nuanced than that with a couple other considerations, but then again, maybe if that were the only thing I say, it might be easier for people to vote with their wallet and provide some motivation for companies to either innovate a little more or skip a year from time to time. That's okay too. They're just releasing phones for the sake of staying relevant. I'm not sure what the answer is to all this, but I do know that maybe skip the A36 this year, especially if you have the A35 or even if you have something else. Next year's phone has got to be a lot better, right? What do you guys think? Did I miss something important? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though, or at least found it a little helpful. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.